crucial thing is the Q&A. If people got to put questions in the Q&A.
Good afternoon, everybody, and good afternoon to people watching online. Welcome to our final meeting, no, our first meeting, I think, it says final here, for the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Cycling and Walking. Now, today, we're looking at subsidies for buying bikes. We have a fantastic range of speakers today. We'll each speak for 10 minutes. 10 minutes, note, please, before we take questions at the end. And they'll be looking at 25 years of the Cycle to Work scheme and alternative models. Can I ask, before we start, that people please put questions in the Q&A box, not the chat box. That's the Q&A box, not the chat box. Our speakers today are, firstly, but not last, Chris Last. Sorry about that, Chris. We get that all the time. I apologise. Chair of the Cycle to Work Alliance. Lee Kidger, Cycling Industry Advisor, former Managing Director of Raleigh. Jonathan Harrison, Chief Executive Officer of the Association of Cycle Traders, and Philip Darnton, Chairman of the Bicycle Association. Again, please post any questions in the Q&A box, not in the chat box. We're going to start with Chris, Chair of the Cycle to Work Alliance. Chris, you have 10 minutes. I'm timing you. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you.
Give me 1 sec, Chris, when I get the slides up.
I'll start the clock just yet.
I'm not studying.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry about the delay, everyone. Slight technical problems here. I think we're nearly there.
Yeah, we are.
Good. Okay. Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Okay, the Cycle to Work Alliance is a policy-focused coalition of the 5 largest providers in the Cycle to Work scheme. Together, our members represent around 80% of the market, and since 2010 have worked collaboratively to highlight the many benefits of regularly cycling to work. We work with multiple stakeholders such as HMRC, HMT, DFT, and the FCA, plus many other stakeholders across the cycling industry, some of whom are here today. Next slide, please. "2024 marks 25 years of the Cycle to Work scheme, and this milestone is a huge opportunity for everybody connected to cycling to benefit. It's also a landmark year and an Olympic year as well, which always tends to sort of deliver significant interest in cycling, particularly when you see the athletes from GB UK, GB Cycling, and the amazing contribution they make. Which really inspires generations, I think, and gets people on their bikes, which is fantastic. This scheme is an affordable route into cycling and a positive driver for change. It attracts the very people who need support with today's cost of living challenges. 7 in 10 scheme users pay in the basic rate of tax and provides a mechanism to spread the cost of a bike over an agreed period of time. Cycle to Work has provided over 2 million certificates in the UK, and 4 in 5 who participate say they cycle every week, up from 2 in 5 before joining. Next slide, please. In front of you, you see the scheme's growth and how it has increased over a number of years. There are clear peaks and troughs, there's no doubt about it, and that demonstrates the success and the resilience of this brilliant scheme. Months and years post-Olympic years helped to sustain growth, and of course, COVID-19 created a surge in cycling, particularly cycling to work safely for key workers, such as those who work in the NHS. And in 2023, we believe almost 25% of bikes purchased actually came through a Cycle to Work scheme. Slide, please. The connected benefits to a successful scheme are marked. A healthier workforce. So 90% of employers believe the scheme helps to improve employee physical and mental well-being. Over 70% of scheme users said that cycling has led to improved physical health, A reduction in the strain on the NHS waiting lists is also a key driver. It offers cost-effective support, so commuters can save an average of 1,262 a year by switching to cycling, rising to 1,600 in Greater London without using credit. The scheme provides new custom and market growth for the cycling industry and boosts economic growth in local communities, i.e. coffee shops and independent bike shops. It also delivers cleaner air quality. So a commuter who switches from a car to a bike for an 8-kilometre commute saves 750 grams of carbon emissions annually. 6 in 10 scheme users would drive to work if they didn't use the scheme, contributing to better air quality within our communities. It also supports the active travel plan with greater participation. Next slide, please.
Chris, can I just ask you to clarify? It said 750 kilograms there of carbon.
Kg, I've got.
Kg.
Yeah, apologies, yes, yeah. Some key successes of the scheme that I've noted. So the removal of the 1,000 scheme limit was notably one of the biggest successes in recent times. This policy change enabled e-bikes and adaptive bikes to be a viable option for employees who thought it not possible to participate in this scheme. Industry partnerships working together as a team to meet our shared ambition for growth and cycling in the market. Next slide, please. Whilst only recently appointed as chair of this alliance, I have been in the industry for over 16 years. Moray Council in 2008 was the first scheme I launched, which received many plaudits for encouraging greener commuting in a somewhat remote location. From there, I've been involved in many more. And as an alliance, we don't intend to rest on our laurels. Our manifesto is simple. We intend to continue to work with government to simplify and minimise administrative barriers, making it easier and more attractive for businesses to offer the Cycle to Work scheme, to unlock the Cycle to Work scheme for those on national minimum wage and the lowest incomes, and also the self-employed, to ensure equitable access to cycling in the UK. And finally, to maximise employee participation in the Cycle to Work scheme among businesses that already offer this scheme, encouraging more people to contribute to the active travel plan, better infrastructure and cycle security. And I can speak personally there because, I mean, I cycle to the train station, I come back, my bike is gone. I drive to the train station, my car's still there. This sort of security and infrastructure that's needed in addition to highways is huge. It's a big manifesto pledge from us. We've been leading the charge for reform to the Cycle to Work scheme, and that makes active travel more accessible, more open and easier for employers and employees. And we ask our colleagues around the room to support us and ultimately continue to grow the scheme over the coming years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. That was admirably brief. We've got more time, hopefully, for the question and answer session. Thank you for your introduction. That's excellent. Reminds us exactly of what the Cycle to Work Alliance is and what the Cycle to Work scheme does. I should just tell anybody watching and in the room that I've recently myself bought a bike, first new bike in 25 years through the Cycle to Work scheme. And it's a folding electric bike made in the UK. So I'm very, very pleased with it. So we now have Lee Kidger. Lee, could you come and take your place here? Welcome. Anybody arriving? Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Please, Lee. So Lee is a cycling industry advisor and the former managing director of Raleigh. Over to you. You've got 10 minutes.
Wait,
Okay, of course.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, first of all, thank you for inviting me here. Yeah, I think for me more so was to focus on more what's happened in Europe and the opportunities that some countries have in Europe to introduce electric bike or electric cargo bike subsidies and their their uptake and how they've impacted the market. So if you pop to the next slide, just to share everybody market size views, just so we can kind of see electric bike adoption. So top left-hand graph is Germany, just for everybody's benefit. The orange graph, or the orange bars are total bike sales in volume. The blue bars are e-bike sales. And then the grey line, which is the really important one in these kind of images, is electric bike adoption. So the amount of electric bikes less in comparison to the total bike sales. And top left is Germany, which you can see nearly 4.5 million bikes a year, over 2 million electric bikes a year. And you can see that gradual rise in terms of that e-bike participation from 2019 to 22. France, who have had some real strong electric bike subsidies, which I'll go on to talk about, have seen that growth even quicker, which now their kind of electric bike participation is in and around 30% of total bike sales. And then the graph on the left-hand side shows the United Kingdom. So essentially, we're in around about 5 to 6% of electric bike adoption at this moment in time. And whilst there is a slight growth, there isn't loads of growth in there. So you'll see our curve, it's kind of around about 10 years behind Germany, and France continuing to outperform all countries in recent years, mainly due to their pledges and their opportunities to buy. So yeah, just a bit of an overview about subsidies and what you can see out in European countries. So the French government have probably been the most open with this. Recently, they've just followed on an early commitment, which they committed to in 2017, to really now offer any resident a state-funded bike, electric bike, or electric cargo bike subsidy of up to €2,000, which has been very well received, and a hell of a lot of people will be taking that up. Germany is a lot more state and localized rather than a full country scheme, and it's mainly around electric cargo bikes, but as I'll go on to talk about later, actually the leasing scheme within Germany is really, really important. So, you know, and actually from a study that was conducted by Sporting Insights, which was commissioned by CIE, actually 24%, which was majorly higher than, say, the UK at 6, Italy at 16, or Germany, that they had received a subsidy to buy an electric bike. So actually what we see here is a real data. It was 2,000 people per country that actually said, right, yes, we've used a government subsidy to buy an electric bike. And if you look around Europe, there's actually over 300 tax incentive and premium purchase schemes across Europe. And also there's 33 countries that have national cycling strategies. So ultimately, lots of government incentives in certain countries, and depending on the country as well, it's either very much state or localized, or total countrywide, which is ultimately what France has done recently. So we're just honing on a couple now. So France, as I'm sure most, if not all, everybody has seen last week, they introduced their next stage of their government subsidies, which is across all models of bikes. So whether that's a traditional bike, an electric bike, all the way through to electric cargo bikes. Actually, that follows on from the previous car scrappage scheme as well, which allowed people within France to trade in their old car for up to €4,000 off an electric bike, which all amounts to that growth in electric bikes and the uptake in bicycles. So, you know, there are caps on specific bikes that are imposed. There's also the inability to purchase outdated technology, which is quite interesting from an innovation perspective. So they really need to make sure that it's the latest and the greatest. And also there actually needs to be a unique identifier on all bikes, which I haven't seen anywhere else across Europe, which is really interesting to see that unique identifier has to be included. So other bits that France have done, there are adoption pathways through tax-free kilometre reimbursements for cycling to work, which is a real nice. I know there's some companies in the UK that have done that off of their own backs, but actually it's a government legislation within France. And I think the French government, if you have a look, they all intend to use these incentives alongside infrastructure and culture improvements to effectively get more people to use alternative transport to cars. So that's France, which is very much government-led, overarching kind of policy. If you take Germany, it's slightly different, where it's a hell of a lot more localized, and then there is also a very much a leasing scheme, which really benefits that from there. So what you see is the leasing scheme in Germany being super important to the adoption of electric through companies, whether that be JobRad or whether that be other companies out there that really hone in on that leasing model, which is a very structured, specific model. It looks at a 3-year cycle as opposed to, say, the UK, which could be anywhere from a 1-year cycle all the way up to a 3 or 4 year cycle. You see that there's a hell of a lot of competition within that. So there is a competitive landscape within Germany from this leasing model, which really allows us to drive that forward. So instead of it being very much a countrywide scheme, it's more localized, and then it's very much on the individual working with their employer, slightly similar to what we do in the UK. And that personal leasing is also a major part of German culture, which you can see in the UK culture as well, which ultimately lends itself to a higher adoption rate. Just knock that off.
We've got your dialogue.
Yeah, next slide. So that's German.
Next slide.
Yeah, please. So yeah, I guess just to summarise from an electric bike adoption piece in Europe. Clearly, the adoption of electric bikes in the UK is clearly behind the EU countries, and by a considerable amount. Subsidy schemes seem to have yielded the most positive adoption, mainly from France, and that's heavily linked to their cycling and walking plan the government has intensely committed to. Germany have the largest electric bike adoption, both in volume and percentage participation of all bicycle purchases, mainly achieved by that strong leasing model, alongside the smaller localized government-backed schemes. Personally, the terminology of cycle to work and leasing seems to be an important adoption tactic that EU countries have used. And my opinion is that the UK can learn from some of the countries to obtain how we continue to grow electric bike adoption, mainly through fiscal stimulation, alongside some cultural adjustments that we have to do. So what I saw from what I know and the research that we've done from this is ultimately a strong plan in a specific country has led to adoption of e-bikes being heightened. And that's it.
Thank you very much again. Thank you for sticking to time, Lee. That was very good and very, very informative. Our next speaker is Jonathan Harrison, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Association of Cycle Traders. Jonathan, the floor is yours when you're ready. When
I'm claiming to be the CEO, if I'm honest, I'm just a director.
Oh, right. It says CEO here.
No, yes.
We did say that was our final meeting. So.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me today. I'd just like to say, because I think it's really important that you hear from the front line today as well. So there's a couple of retailers with me.
Yeah.
So if I came with you, I can refer to the retailers.
Of course. Absolutely.
Okay. Am I good to go?
The floor is yours.
Hello. For those that don't know me, I'm Jonathan Harrison, Director of the Association of Cycle Traders, representing the interest of circa 4,000 cycling businesses throughout the UK, from mobile mechanics through to larger distributors, with a particular focus on cycle retailers. There are approximately 2,500 bike shops in the UK, and the ACT membership encompasses 1,000 full members. I'm grateful to be here today to share the concerns of the ACT membership and seek a way forward for improvement and expansion of the Cycle to Work scheme. So why am I here today? Just a slide, please. I'll carry on talking. Towards the end of last year, the ACT were approached by a large volume of cycle retailers throughout the UK, expressing their concerns with the implementation of the Cycle to Work scheme and calling for immediate change. The ACT called for a collaboration of everyone in the cycle industry to work together to reform Cycle to Work as the priority growth strategy for the cycle trade and to increase cycling for all. This campaign now has well over 400 businesses signed up, the majority of whom are independent retailers, but also larger distributors who have helped asking retailers to join the pledge. I'm not here today with a solution, but I am here today to highlight the challenges faced by cycle retailers and some of their views on what needs to be changed to kickstart discussions to find a solution. I see today's meeting as a start of a collaboration process to improve the scheme to get more people cycling more often. Yes, thank you. The current scheme is too complicated. Typically, the employer pays for the voucher, the provider owns the bike, the worker hires the bike, the voucher is paid back by a salary sacrifice, and more often than not, the end user doesn't get a full understanding of how the scheme actually works. I think I worked out yesterday there's 16 points through the journey for Cycle to Work to happen. The end of the initial hire period is another area of complication, which needs reviewing. Typically, workers enter into an extended hire period after the salary sacrifice ends. During the extended period, the bicycle is still owned by the provider. Some providers charge fees, providing an additional source of income to the providers, while others do not. Often these fees can come as a surprise to the end user. The scheme needs to provide clear parameters for this element. Furthermore, the scheme no longer fits the purpose for which it was originally intended, to get people to cycle to work. Since the pandemic, working habits have fundamentally changed, with more people working remotely. Therefore, the to work requirement is increasingly difficult to meet for some people. There is no question that encouraging cycling is beneficial to help net zero goals, provide solutions to transport, to help with the cost of living crisis, as well as improving health and well-being. But couldn't the scheme be more broadly structured to be more inclusive? Under the current scheme, salary sacrifice excludes many potential users who are low paid or self-employed, or their employer doesn't offer it. Many of the people who would benefit most from lower cost transport or switching from public transport cannot access the scheme as they are earning a minimum wage. And if they sacrificed a portion of their salary, it would take them below the minimum wage. Ironically, this includes a significant number of people that work in cycle retail. We should be exploring ways to make the scheme more inclusive, ensuring that a broader range of people can benefit, encouraging cycling for everyone. Next slide, please. Oh, hang on. Yes. So I got confused at the top right. There's a feeling amongst my members that there is an inequitable distribution of costs and profits associated with the Cycle to Work scheme. And at this point, if I could get my retailer Mark, who's kindly come down from Sheffield today.
Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. What I've come down today to talk about is the disparity of profits and the obscene amounts given to the cycle scheme providers, to the point where when you look at cycle's scheme itself, they're making, roughly speaking, 40 to 50%, 45–50% margin on net profit from what they do. An average dealer would make, on a good year, between 3 and 7% net profit. The money that we're being charged from cycle schemes is actually bankrupting cycle dealers. So the people who are wanting to further the scheme and promote the scheme are the ones that you are harming from the charges, the obscene charges that the Cycles Alliance and their members are charging the retailers. And we feel that this is unfair. There is no consultation and it's a complete disparity between the two.
Mark, may I ask which retailer you're from, or would you rather
I represent quite a few retailers. My own business is called JJ Cycles.
I thought so. Sorry, I'm from Leeds, so I know your
if you wish, I have prepared a document that gives you most of the information on where you believe this to go wrong. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, I'm going to. Okay, so I'll try and rattle through this quickly. Cycle retailers are an essential part of the cycle to work supply chain and have helped grow the scheme to where it is today. So fees need to be fair, transparent and consistent. The fees charged by different providers currently range from 4% to 15%. Some schemes have a cap, others do not. We would argue that the administrative burden in processing a cycle to work voucher is the same for a £1,000 bicycle as a £10,000 bicycle. It'd be fairer to establish a fee set to reflect the work of the provider. Also, manufacturers and distributors benefit from sales going through the scheme, and perhaps they should pay a portion of the fees levied by cycle to work providers. And just on the last point, at the moment, there are no universal terms and conditions that scheme providers have to adhere to, which is proving detrimental to my members. As an example of this, the providers recently cited FCA changes to consumer duty legislation to give fairer pricing to customers. Other providers are not agreeing with them, which is causing confusion. Let me give you an example from a retailer's perspective. A bike is on sale with already reduced margins. A customer would like to purchase the bike using a cycle to work voucher. The fees payable by the retailer to the provider means the retailer makes a loss on the bike. It's clearly not sustainable. Also, clarity needs to be given on timeframes for issue and settlement of vouchers under the scheme. End users should not have to wait lengthy periods of time for the issue of their voucher, whilst the retailer is sitting on stock for that. Retailers should be aware at the start of the transaction when they will receive payment of the voucher value. Payment terms, anecdotally, range from 3 days to 3 months. And as with any small business, cash flow is critical. A centralised clear set of terms for the scheme would be beneficial to all, including the end user. And final slide, please. I'm optimistic that positive changes to the cycle to work scheme can be made for the benefit of all stakeholders. With a fully joined up industry support plan, we believe that we can significantly increase the volume of transactions that go through the new look cycle to work scheme, convert sceptical retailers to promote the scheme, and most importantly, have a material impact upon the public cycling more, building a momentum that will grow and grow.
Thank you very much indeed, Jonathan. Thank you also to Mark. We have one more speaker. And it's
Thank you very much.
Thank you, that was really informative. And that is Philip Darton, the chairman of the Bicycle Association. Philip, please take your seat. Just look like mastermind.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, everybody, for sticking to time. Philip, you're our last speaker. We'll have a question and answer session after this. Are we ready? Yeah, we are. Okay. Floor is yours. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much, Fabian, Selene, for the opportunity to say something about subsidies. I should just start off because I have no idea how many people are listening and how many people really know about the Bicycle Association. The Bicycle Association, I think, has often been assumed to be some kind of consumer-facing campaign group. It's neither of those things. It's not a lobby group, it's not a campaign group, and it isn't consumer-facing. It is absolutely committed entirely and exclusively to the success and future of the cycle industry. And I think that's come as a surprise to quite a lot of people as to just how substantial in our economy the cycle industry is. If you could look at the first chart. There are about 100 manufacturers. There are about 300 distributors. And as you've heard from Jonathan, there are a couple of thousand retailers. That means that there are something like, excuse me, 23,000 direct jobs in the cycle industry. It stretches UK-wide, and it starts with quite everyday things to high-tech. Sales, and I'm sorry to say that even since we published this number is declining. It sales 2 million bikes per year. We may come back to that decline, of which, as you've also heard from Lee, about 150,000, or I should say only about 150,000, are electrically assisted pedal cycles. And that sums to sales of about 2 billion in value every year, not insubstantial. And working very hard also on innovation. And we've put these four issues together into a manifesto. If we look at the next slide, we've developed a strategy for growth and for jobs. And indeed, the chairs of the association and also many other MPs were present before Christmas in November in the House of Commons when we launched what we rather grandly called a manifesto. I think it was, let's call it a strategy, probably it's a bit fairer to say, a strategy for growth and jobs. And that's what the industry is all about. It's about growth and jobs. In total, if you look at all the people whose livelihoods, to some extent, this is a bit of a stretch, but to some extent, depend on cycling, and that will include people who have tourist interests, contributes about £7.5 billion a year to the UK economy. If you look at all of those people, it's something like 64,000 green jobs. And it's very clear that if we're going to move forward, and Lee has actually probably stolen most of my thunder, but at least we agree with her, electrification is the story. The future absolutely is electric. And for the growth of the industry, we have to appeal to new and completely different people. People who, frankly, wouldn't consider themselves to be cyclists at all. We have to think about who might buy electric bikes, and we have to think about the future and future generations and the children. And it's those two things that the Bicycle Association's industry strategy has really focused on. So if we look at the first of those and say, the electric bikes, electrically assisted pedal cycles, they really are a low carbon alternative. We did a large study with Transport for Quality of Life, whom, as you know, are a well-respected independent research agency, in March of last year. And the link to this particular report you will find on the screen at the end of my presentation. And that report showed that we could expect, with proper investment and proper planning and real government commitment, 5% of personal journeys to be eventually by electric bike. And again, to the point about e-cargo, 15% of urban van miles, rather than those half or one-third empty white vans circulating all the time. It's a real green, light electric alternative for, when the study was done, up to 1.5 billion green car kilometers with minimal environmental impact. And it's something which can be done quicker and with less resource than any other decarbonisation effort for transport. The assisted pedal cycles are here now. They're ready now. They are in profusion now. And that is something which it seems to be very hard to convince government that this is really an extraordinary opportunity right now and available in scale. And so the question is, how exactly are we going to achieve that? Let's look at the next slide. As Lee has said, and I shamelessly will repeat, because if you've heard it once, you certainly need to hear it twice or three times. And the evidence case is strong. Again, another piece of work Lynn Sloman, familiar to many of you, did for us in 2019, called really on the economic and case for a UK bike incentive. And that drew on data at that time, which has significantly been updated, 300, you heard Lee say, 300 active e-bike subsidy schemes, 24 of them in the United States, Atlanta last week announced they were doing a new scheme in the city centre for low-income people, starting right in the metro area, a small amount of money to start with, as a project to see how well they could make it work. In March of last year, Congress approved regulations for taxpayers' credits on the purchase of electrically assisted pedal cycles. Germany, Italy, France, and they work. So repeat, if I may, on the next slide, the top right-hand side, France and the UK sold about the same number of electric bikes in 2016. And look at 2022, and it's worse in 2023, more than 750,000 bikes electrically assisted in France, and an absolutely flat, and we look as though in 2023, declining sales of electric bikes, less than 160,000. 160,000 plays 750,000. This year, Germany will be bitterly disappointed that they won't hit 2023, they were bitterly disappointed that they couldn't quite hit 2.3 million e-bike sales because they couldn't get the bikes in time. The value of the market has quadrupled in Germany, and you can see that those who manufacture have seen sustained growth. And that growth has compensated in Europe for the decline in pedal cycle sales. What we're seeing in the UK is both a dramatic decline in pedal cycle sales and no growth and no compensation from electrically assisted pedals. Now, I think the case is really strongly made. In fact, well, let's look at the next one. What can we do about it? The case is strongly made by the publication last week of the National Travel Attitude Statistics, Wave 9. I had to write that down, I couldn't remember that. It was published on the 16th of January. And it says cost has tripled as a barrier for the purchase of a bike between 2021 and 2023. It said that in 2021, in their survey, 6% of people saw cost as a barrier. And in 2023, that had risen to 16%. And if you looked into that, and you looked into 16 to 39-year-olds, and within that you looked into ethnic minorities, you were seeing figures of more than 26%. So the fact that a subsidy is essential seems to me to be supported both by how successful it has actually been in Europe and the States, and the fact that it's now shown to be a real disincentive in the UK unless something's done about it. And so the cycle industry is really now trying to get behind speaking to all political parties to say, actually, investment behind electrically assisted pedal cycle incentive schemes would yield 1 million more people. Timescale, tell me how much we've got per year. But there's absolutely no doubt from the work that's been done by independent researchers, we could get 1 million more people per year. We could do it through a voucher scheme. It could cover e-bikes, e-cargo bikes. It could cover specialist bikes. Very, very important, because I think we just ignore the fact that there are many, many people who would benefit immensely from specialist electric bikes. And I think that it's actually, when we talk about the cost, it looks to us as though the fact that the government says it's part of an integrated transport strategy is almost more important than the absolute sum of money that you get as your voucher. So don't quiz me on, is it 200, is it 250, is it 300? The important thing is the government says, we have an integrated strategy to transport. And within that, cycling plays an important part. And within that, electric bikes are very important. And that's why we see this as an important investment. What's attractive too is, of course, that you can structure this depending on the interests of government. You can structure it to target groups. You can scale it up. You can phase it. France has done quite a lot of that. Spend funds in phases. And you can monitor and evaluate it at every stage. It's a really effective use of funding. So our first objective in our strategy was all about electrically assisted pedal cycles and subsidies. Absolutely vital. We banged on about it for years. It is the future of the industry, one way or sadly the other. The second objective, of course, is not just about new grown-up people who haven't been tempted by ordinary bicycles, by pedal cycles, but who might well be tempted by the idea of substituting an electric bike for a car trip, if they can afford it, or to help them journey. The other group, not as grown-ups, is children. And we really must widen the access to mobility. We know that if you don't teach kids to ride bikes when they're 9, 10, 11, perhaps 12, they never learn. The parallels with swimming are oft quoted. And it is very, very difficult to get adults to learn to ride if they've never learned when they were children. And so children become the next generation. And the next generation of cyclists, if they don't learn when they're 9, 10, or 11, are lost. They become the lost generation, and those declining figures decline further and further. And again, it is our recommendation to any government that we should see a 0 rating on children's bikes. We should fund bikeability training for every single child. We have lobbied well over the last decade for more and more funding, and it has gradually come. But it's still the case that it's not funding for every single child. And I have to hurry up. And 0 VAT on cycles as mobility aids, as I mentioned. Here we go then. Why only 22% of children cycle regularly? Children's cycle sales have declined by 31% by 29 versus 2019. And we think the 23 figures might show a decline of 40% when they're published in a month's time. 25% of children, government statistic, age 5 to 10, don't have access to a bike. And yet, children's clothes, helmets, shoes, all 0 rating. If you want it badly, you want to signal that you want it badly. And so this is what we're up to. We're trying to see our way through to government to say, integrate transport and industrial strategies. Here's an industry that can be part of your transport objectives. Boost and widen access to mobility for all groups, and crucially, all generations. Reinvigorate the high street, increase the skills of the people who work there, more and more electrically assisted bikes, and deliver that electrification very fast. Thank you. This is the last slide, and it will be part of the presentation.
Yeah, sorry. No, I just wanted to get enough time for questions and answers.
Of course you do. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely fine. Okay.
Thank you.
Right, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Right, we've got a few questions. Firstly, before we go on to questions, my co-chair, Selene Saxby's joined us. Thank you, Selene, for being here. I know you had other business to attend to. Do you want to come and sit here? Because I know you're going to wind up. The first question, thank you very much, Philip. That's always very informative. The first question is regarding Lee's presentation. Is he able to clarify what counts as outdated technology for the subsidies? Lee.
So that was related to the French subsidies, which essentially stipulates that it kind of clarifies that it's just more outdated technology. So for me, that's more about older or second-hand bikes, or electric bikes cannot be part of that. Whereas that's, which ultimately, like you said, Philip, is very much around batteries and tech in terms of that. So there's no specifics on it, but I think that's kind of where that relates to.
Leading on from that, and I think this is also directed to you, Lee, I'll try and get questions for others as well. I'm sure we've got some there. Who owns the bike in the German leasing schemes, and who replaces it in the case of damage?
So who owns it? It is the employer again. So very similar to the UK. So employer view through various schemes, as is. So very similar to the UK cycle to work.
Okay, thanks. Next question I've got here: is it correct that the cycle scheme prevents local bike shops passing their cycle scheme's 10% transaction fees on to customers. I don't know if anybody wants to volunteer. Yes, Mark. Yes.
Yeah, cycle scheme has put in a place from the FCA rules. They've decided that no cycle scheme can ask a customer to pay towards the cycle scheme itself, being as they charge us so much. We are actually losing money on the bike, so we try to charge the customer. The cycle scheme have used the FCA rules to stop that, which will end up with loose cycle shops because of it.
Okay, that's very clear. Thank you. Next question. What is the relationship between shared bike growth in the UK and Germany and France? Anybody want to come in on this? Shared bike growth.
Shared bike growth and e-bike growth.
And e-bike growth. Sorry, that's not an e question I've got here. In the UK and Germany and France. Anybody? No? Okay, no takers for this. Right, we better move on then.
5 seconds.
Okay.
Somebody else asked.
No.
Okay.
Online.
Oh, online, no.
Right,
online.
so do you want me to take
Actually,
Simon Moyle? Yeah, I was going to say
Jerry Lawson.
Jerry Lawson.
Yeah.
What his question or to answer the question?
To ask his question.
Right, okay. So Jerry Lawson asks, for the cycle to work scheme, how much does it cost per year? What do the providers earn per bike? What do retailers earn out of it? And who is charged for the scheme? Gosh, wow.
That's not one question.
Mark again.
Well, we are charged for the scheme providers, so they take huge amounts of profit from the cycle retailers.
Yeah.
The disparity in the profit is massive. What was the other part of the question, sorry?
What do providers earn per bike?
Well, provide on that sheet that I've given you inside that thing, it says that they earn approximately 45 to 55% out of the cycle scheme being provided to the customer. So out of every sale, their profit, their net profit when they're making it is huge.
And what do retailers? Sorry.
So profit per bike would be closer to 150 to 200 pounds. If the commission rate is 10% of the average bike price is 300 to 2,000 pounds.
So that's the provider, not the retailer. The next part of Jerry's question was, what do retailers earn out of it, and who is charged for the scheme?
Very little.
Okay.
So the net of most cycle shops, independent bike shops, is between 3 and 7% net profit per year.
There's some disparity between huge profits and minimum gains there. I think what would be really sensible is for the Cycle to Work Alliance that the ACC to maybe meet and discuss this in more detail properly and look for a joint approach. Not prepared to talk about commercials today.
Okay, fair enough. Ben Foley next.
Yes.
Ben Foley from Wheels for Wellbeing says, or asks, disabled people have greater need for both the exercise benefits and for the cost savings of a cheaper means of transport. Disabled people tend to be on lower incomes than the population in general, but adapted cycles suitable for disabled people tend to be many times more expensive. Entry level may be 20 times the cost compared to a new entry level standard cycle. Schemes like Cycle to Work are also less use for disabled people, since discrimination means many more of us are unemployed, and those in work much more likely to be on a low income. How do we bridge that gap for disabled people? Anybody want to volunteer to answer this one?
Well, the scheme needs to readdress how it deals with low income earners. At the moment, there's a disparity with people who've got extreme wealth being able to purchase toys that are not even used for bike to work. And then the people who need that help aren't getting it. We're letting down most of the population with Cycle to Work. And I'd like to hear the numbers of new customers that come through these schemes. Whereas I think it's mainly repeat customers, wealthier clients that are buying more expensive bikes, but just using the scheme to cut the amount that they pay.
Chris, do you want to come in on that at all? Because you made some points about.
Yeah, I mean, I raised the point earlier that 7 in 10 people who use the scheme are actually basic wage taxpayers for the data we have. So again, meeting between Cycle to Work Alliance and the ACT. So very sensible approach.
Yes, of course.
Sorry,
So,
as a late arrival, apologies, I was dealing with another scheme that doesn't work very well. I was going to grocery code of practice debate for my hundreds of farmers. But just listening to this, and apologies if it was covered earlier, but my district council this weekend has announced that they're not going to hit their net zero target, that they're only reduce their emissions by 16%. It does feel like this, and when you talk to my county council, I'm very rural, they don't build any cycle paths, and actually I've been pushing for to have a future meeting on children cycling to work, because we build housing estates without a single cycle path, and active travel is not considered. Is this not something that we should look at perhaps devolving down to our councils? So rather than relying on us in the centre, because any policy you make here in Westminster is beautiful. Just look at all those bikes outside. And come to my constituency, we don't have any. It's a very different animal. But if this was to translate to those communities, and you've got your councils, all of whom have signed up to have a net zero target by, and I'll task them with delivering this with their retail. I've got fantastic bike shops in Barnstaple with our fantastic local retail, that we could design schemes that were fit for our communities, because whatever we do up here, whether the journeys are achievable, you know, many of the journeys in my patch are 20 miles, and I still have 2.5% of my population cycle to work, which I'm very
thanks, Zane. No, that's a very good thought.
May I just say,
Yeah, sorry, go on.
so I'm from Independent Regions Association,
Yeah.
and we are all for encouraging people to be healthy and use of bike, and ACT is part of our group now, and it's really interesting. I have a fear that if it's sometimes when it gets too old, is that local hobby horses take charge to a certain extent, and accessibility becomes a problem, because instead of creating cycle lanes, you create traffic-free zones that you don't comply to, and that's often to the detriment of high streets, not to the benefit of high streets. And that's all we're saying. There needs to be a good balance approach.
Yeah.
But it's not. This shouldn't be an anti-car thing. It's more pro-bike.
No.
Yeah, which is fine.
Yeah, no, thank you for that point. Yes, sir.
Question from the floor, if that's allowed. I'm Nicholas Hallam, Transport Editor at the Sunday Times. Some of these chaps I've been speaking to in the last week, so they'll be aware of this. Has anybody actually attempted, and if not, why not, to produce hard data on what these bikes are used for? I'll elaborate. I'm absolutely astonished that a quarter of a century after this scheme began, more than a quarter of a century after we had the internet, more than 15 years after we have these devices, each one of which is tracking us the whole time with steps and the rest, I have not found any proper data. I find survey data, which is ridiculous, opinions. I don't even see, for all this talk of cycle to work, I don't believe there's any check on whether people do use it to cycle to work for 50% of the time, as per DFT. I've talked to previous transport ministers and secretaries about this over the years, even before I did this job. I'm just astonished that that in your world, and I'm waiting, I'd love to hear an answer. In every other walk of life you can think of, data tracking is done and people volunteer. In the real world, every cyclist, not every, a large number, go around tracking their data. Yeah. It would not be difficult to find an employer who's run a lot of bikes through their scheme saying, do you want to volunteer to their staff? Let's see basic questions. How often do you use it per week? What's been the mode shift, if any? What's been the health benefit? So then you can go to government and actually say, here's some evidence. Yeah. But at the moment, you can't.
Thank you for making that point.
But I'd like an answer, because
nice
I've even put this to, well, some of the people in the room know, some I've had to deal through their PRs. They can't give any hard evidence, which I think shooting everybody in the foot. I won't say.
There has never been an independent audit of the cycle to work system. Most people in the industry, on the retail side, don't believe that this works. And the idea that the system itself should be tagged on to, like it says, the apps that provide the data, so the consumer themselves earn their rebate from the tax system by the amount of miles that they put in. There's plenty of apps out there that provide small rewards for people who ride to work. The more miles they do, the more rewards they have, like free coffee and so on.
Thank you for that, Mark, and thank you, Nicholas, for your very important points. We are almost out of time, I wanted to get a few more questions from the screen, but
Can I just add one
yes,
other
of
thing
course,
regarding
Chris, go on.
the survey, if possible?
Yeah.
There was an independent survey conducted by the Science of Compliance. I would be happy to share that.
Not surveys, data,
Data.
actual evidence of actual lives, which is what the rest of the world's been running on for a quarter of a century. I'm just saying, sorry, I'm not trying to be confrontational.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Philip.
okay.
You know about all this.
Chris, do you want to come back on that?
No.
Okay. Right. We were thinking of extending. Can you stay for a little bit longer?
No, but I'm quite happy to hand over to you.
Okay.
I'm very sorry. I'm on a very
Do you,
tight schedule
well,
this
okay.
afternoon.
Do you want to? We've got 3 minutes till 5:30. I'm happy to stay another 5 minutes. If people can stay 5 minutes, have we got this room for longer? Do you want to? We've got a few minutes in the agenda for you to make some comments, Selene as co-chair. Is there anything you want to say over and above what you've already said?
I think the need for data as a mathematician is always vital, and I know full well that many of my friends have brought their bike to work and they don't even go to work, and so their husbands run a business and they've managed to get through the scheme that way. So I think you know it isn't being used. When you look at how people actually travel to work in London and look at the pile of fallen over electric bikes out there, you know, people can use a bike to get to work in a different way here. In a seat like mine, we don't have schemes like that, but what I have been flabbergasted by is where we do have an e-scooter scheme, despite being so rural, is how incredibly well used those devices have been. And I wonder if the model is now, which is why I believe we should push it down to council level, because different councils have different schemes, and actually, in my mind, there are different ways that are working. When you look at the e-bikes here, and the usage in the mornings that you see of people clearly going to work on a bike, which was the whole point of the scheme, is to increase bicycle usage. And obviously for the retailers, we want you to sell more, but just calling it going to work, when clearly we want children to go to school, and actually doesn't matter if it's mum's going to work or mum's picking kids up to school on their bike.
In 2015-16, we used to sell about 3.5 million bikes a year. It's now dropped to about, I think 2023 is about 1.64, as Philip said.
Philip said, yeah.
So despite having the cycle to work scheme, it's failing. It's failing in its aspect of delivery for the people who need it the most.
So to what extent, says, I can't read the name, is the cycle to work scheme supporting, James Allen, supporting the bike industry against a tricky market backdrop?
It isn't. It's actually a detriment to most businesses in the UK.
Any dissent on that?
No, we must stop everyone working from home and get back to the office on a bike.
Yeah, exactly. So Rob Ash asks, Sustrans are currently working on a report with the Financial Fairness Trust on the challenges people on low incomes have when trying to get a cycle. The report will be released later this year. So thank you for that information, Rob. Rob Howes says not all cycle to work providers are equal. Green Commute, I guess that's supposed to be, initiative only charges 5% and the reseller can pass this on to the employee, make it a no cost to the reseller. Thank you for that point, Rob. Simon Moyle, Philip, I love the objectives, specifically children. One of the areas I think would help is cycle proficiency at schools. Doing this at school made me cycle to school, which led me to cycle to work when I started working. How do we make this happen again? Any thoughts? Yes, Philip.
Well, I'm slightly puzzled by the question. There is a scheme called Bikeability.
Yeah.
And I did think that everybody had forgotten the phrase cycling proficiency and put their badges away. Bikeability has been running now for also more than 25 years. And it's funded by the government. This year, it will be funded to the tune of about £25 million. Local authorities, local schools apply for funding according to the number of children they've got in their class. And it comes in 3 levels. And the first level is absolutely secure on the playground. But the second level, which we try to get every child through, is on small side roads, real learning experience. It's not the milk bottles experience that some older members may well remember from their playground cycling around. So it is in existence, it is funded, it's been a struggle to get more funding for it, but the idea that every child has the opportunity to learn to ride is not, I think, controversial in any political party. Just the funding and the mechanism best way to distribute that.
And in schools like mine, they keep their bikes at school because it's not safe for them to cycle to school.
Yeah.
They do their bikeability, but I think, which is why I sense there's a big project, but I really think there's some work we could do here on pushing ministers.
I think, Selene, that I must just say that this is about learning to ride, a life skill, and once learned, never forgotten. where you ride to will depend through life. But if you don't learn when you're young,
I agree entirely. I'm a huge fan of bikeability.
Oh, sorry, one at a time. Yeah.
I'm going to shoot, but Guy Opperman is with us on the 5th of February at our next meeting, which is what I was supposed to say
Right.
in closing.
Thank
So
you very
please
much
come
for
and
that.
tell the minister all your
It's
problems.
in person only, it won't be.
In person only, right, okay, that's important
So
to
do
people
send
online.
your questions to me in advance, I'll be happy to put them to
Okay.
for you.
Chris, you wanted to say something, you were just.
Yeah, I was just a comment on the infrastructure. Again, you know, we talked about improving and investment for highways and safer cycling, and also security of bikes as well. If, you know, if an employee cycles to work, when they come off a shift, you know, in an NHS trust, they want to make sure their bikes are there.
Yeah,
And in many cases, that's not the case.
No, absolutely. Sorry, Jonathan, were you? No, okay. Can I bring in somebody from online? We've just got very little time left. Monica Siliano, is that? I hope I pronounced it correctly. It appears that the current government is, I'd say, uninterested in cycle subsidies. How do we change that? Any thoughts?
by making the case over and over and over again, that every MP you can possibly find.
Okay,
The
Monica.
case is unanswerable, but there is a long-standing scepticism in the Treasury about incentive schemes, and you've heard some of that scepticism echoed in the room today.
Okay, I think I'm going to stop on that note, if I may, just to repeat what Selene said. Our next meeting is Monday, the 5th of February.